invite our children forward today to see what's in my Easter basket this morning. Hi, Tim. Quite a crowd this morning. Did anything special happen in your house overnight? Did anything get left that was different than usual this morning? Yeah? Did anyone have an Easter basket this morning? Yeah? 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 And what was in there? Bunnies and bunny treats. All right.
Chocolate bunnies.
Chocolate bunnies.
And the bunny that's over there.
All right. And did anyone have jelly beans? Yeah. They're not for everyone. Well, I have a different kind of Easter basket that I do every year because this is what was done when I was growing up. My mother's family was all Polish American, and they kept Polish Catholic traditions. And so my Easter basket is a very special and very different one. Now when I was growing up, I had my own Easter basket with the chocolate bunnies and all of that too. But this was a family Easter basket. And it has some very different kinds of things. Would you like to see what's in my basket?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So I have it prepared in the traditional way with a beautiful embroidered cloth with spring flowers. And let's see, oh, there's lots of things in here. There's some salt and pepper. And because I'm in Utah now, it's of course Redmond real salt. Yeah. And I have some eggs. How many of you did you color eggs at your house? Yes. And I colored my eggs with natural dye. I made blue eggs this year. Oh, blue eggs. I love blue eggs. And these were made with red cabbage. So there's some hard-cooked eggs. And I must admit, the little netted chickens are not a Polish tradition, but just something that a friend made for me, and I have to use them because they're adorable. So, and there's some horseradish. Jar of horseradish. Mm-hmm. And some, let's see, what's in this? This is, well, it's a hot cross bun. Normally it would be my mother's placek, which is a kind of Polish coffee cake, but it takes like 3 days to make. This was a lot easier to get at Smith's. So, and besides which, I really like hot cross buns, so it's a special sweet treat. And let's see, oh, there's some ham and Polish sausage. Cool. And let's see, oh, and there's something else in here. In this special thing, we have rye bread. Now, it's not the Polish rye bread that I'm used to, but it's the closest I could get in Utah. So we have rye bread, all in a special little container. And then my very favorite part of the whole Easter basket, my butter lamb. Oh, my butter lamb, okay, that I made yesterday. Yes, and I'm going to tell you more about what the butter lamb stands for. But you might be wondering, well, why does she have all these funny things in her basket, Asia? You can't eat, you know what, you can't eat this butter lamb, and I will tell you something. We are going to all have an opportunity to eat this butter lamb because I'm going to share it as part of our special Easter brunch downstairs. So you can eat part of the butter lamb after the service. Cameron? Butter can be used for a lot of different things. So at any rate, you may be wondering wondering, well, why are all these kind of foods in her basket? And the reason is that if you are a Catholic, in the 6 weeks leading up to Easter, you are asked to give up meat. And when I was a girl, you had to give up meat for the entire 6 weeks, which, you know, if you're a vegetarian family, is not a big deal. But for a lot of folks, that involves a sacrifice. And that is it's a specific spiritual practice to give something up that's important to you. And so you give up meat for 6 weeks. But when Easter comes, you can celebrate and have meat again. And so when I was growing up, this Polish sausage and this ham would have been the very first meat I had had in 6 weeks. And any of my family members would have had in 6 weeks. And so we would take this basket to the church on Saturday, all filled with these goodies. And the priest would bless them. And so you can imagine a whole sanctuary filled with beautiful baskets, and the priest coming along and blessing all the baskets. So to bless this food to be eaten on Easter morning. And indeed, all these foods, this is exactly what I had for breakfast this morning. I'm usually an oatmeal kind of gal, or yogurt. And so this is the one day a year I eat the traditional Polish Easter breakfast. So you're going to hear more about this during the sermon, toward the end of the sermon. But I wanted you to see what was in my Easter basket, because it does represent a different way of thinking about Easter, and a different way of coming into the Easter season, and a different way of celebrating on Christmas, listen to me, on Easter morning. So, thank you all, and and you all know that there's an Easter egg hunt afterwards, right? Right? Yeah, everybody knows. Well, I just wanted to be really sure everybody knows. Because some of you came in after the announcements. So I wanted to be really sure that every one of you knows that that happened. Yes, we have a clap up here. Yes, Easter egg hunt. So thanks so much. Okay. What a lovely, lovely Easter morning, especially since Easter's falling early this year. You know, where I grew up in the Finger Lakes of Western New York, Easter's celebrated sometimes as a glorious spring day and sometimes in the middle of a snowstorm. I have photographs of myself as a little girl in all my Easter finery on top of my snowsuit with drifts over top, higher than my head. And so every year, Easter's a bit different. In fact, I noticed that today's weather forecast said for tonight through Tuesday there might be snow, and I thought, oh, this is just classic. And so things do change. And some years I have focused my Easter energy as a spring celebration of the renewal of life. And some years, like this year, I'm drawn into a contemplation about the story of Easter and the significance of an ancient story that still means so much to so many people. I've been contemplating about the meaning of the story of the death and resurrection of Jesus for me as a 21st century Unitarian Universalist. It's a big question to ponder. It's a question that resonates actually all the way back to the early days of Christianity. The Gospels, the stories that were told about Jesus, were all written decades after his death, and they each tell us just a part of the story. Unfortunately, we don't have a complete story about Jesus regarding either his life or his death. But what we do know from biblical scholars is that there was a man named Jesus who lived about 2,000 years ago and inspired people in Roman-occupied Palestine. He inspired them to think differently about how they were living and how they wanted to live in the world. The stories tell us that Jesus traveled through the region preaching and teaching that people should love their neighbor, even people they don't know, people doing things that they don't like, and people from other religions. He taught that people should share with others and be peaceful together. He was concerned about the sick, about the poor, about the widows, about the orphans, about people with little going for them, letting them know that they were important, or as we would say in Unitarian Universalism speak, that they have inherent worth and dignity. These were radical new messages that gave people a new perspective, a new hope in the future, and a new way of life to consider amidst living in terrible oppression under the Roman occupation. Now, over time, in his travels, more and more people were attracted to him. Some followers actually gave up their jobs to travel around with him and help him manage the big crowds that were gathering wherever he went. He became a celebrity in his own way, with lots of people talking about him, creating quite a buzz across the land. And of course, his success at spreading this new message of love, peace, justice, and mercy drew attention from the Roman authorities, who did not appreciate the power of Jesus to draw a crowd and fill their heads with ideas about a new world order, the kingdom of God. So the Romans plotted to kill him and make an example out of him to stop this radical movement from going any further. Now, the story tells us that Jesus suspected that he would be killed, and he gathered his closest followers around him for a last meal together, in which he asked them to continue to have meals together in the future as a way to remember him. Hours later, Jesus was arrested and given a fake trial, tortured, and then hung on a cross in the primary way that Romans carried out public executions at that time. Of course, his followers were very upset about his painful and violent death, and they took his dead body off the cross, prepared him for burial, and placed him in a small cave carved out of the earth, with a rock rolled in front of it, as was the custom for burying people in that part of the world in those days. The stories then tell us that 3 days after the burial, some of the followers went to his tomb to anoint his body with spices. And they were surprised to discover that the rock had been pushed away and that his body wasn't there. The stunned followers were even more amazed when an angel, or in one version of the story, Jesus himself, said that his body had been resurrected or taken up into heaven. This heavenly messenger also said that Jesus would meet up with his followers in Galilee, a nearby town. The stories go on to tell us about Jesus appearing to his followers and encouraging them to carry on his work of spreading messages about love, peace, justice, and mercy throughout the entire world. And thus, over 2,000 years later, people who are followers of Jesus continue to preach his message through what became the many forms of the Christian faith. This past week is the holiest week in the Christian year, because it commemorates Jesus' last days, his violent death, and his amazing resurrection. Today, on Easter, Christians celebrate Jesus coming to life again after being killed, proving that he was not an ordinary man, that he was the Son of God, sent to earth in human form to tell people how to live better by being more loving, kind, and just in all their actions. Now, each of us has the right to look at this story and decide for ourselves what seems right and true about it. Remember, these stories were written by people who wanted to share Jesus' message, and also people who were still feeling rather raw with grief and shock about his execution. He was their hero. And so they told a really heroic story about his death and coming to life again. Is it true? We really don't know. But ultimately, we can't know. It's a mystery. But what we do know is this. Early Christians were more inspired by the life of Jesus, not his death and resurrection. Their artwork that shows Jesus on the cross was very different from the versions that we see today. Beautiful mosaics show a living Jesus, fully clothed, smiling down on all creation. The cross itself sprouts branches, becomes the tree of life, with animals and people on the ground surrounding Jesus with loving energy. It seems that the early Christians appreciated Jesus' message that he brought new life to the world. And they captured this image of sacred healing love in their artwork. And they also practiced it in their lifestyle and in their communities of faith. This is the Jesus depicted as the Lord of the dance, leading us in a joyful, life-affirming dance of love. Unfortunately, this very early understanding of Jesus gave way to centuries of people co-opting the story about his death to put their own agenda forward. Debates over the nature of Jesus, was he God, was he man, got all tangled up with politics, power politics. Debates over the meaning of the death and resurrection also played out over several centuries, reflecting the power structures of the day and ultimately perverting the story of Jesus to justify these power politics. Over time, the focus shifted from Jesus as life-giving and life-affirming to a harsh atonement emphasis where all humans are depraved sinners only saved by the blood sacrifice of the Son of God. I think it's rather sad, actually. I'm really sad that that happened, because I really liked the messages of Jesus. And while many still buy into what is truly a corruption of Christianity, there have been people along the way who saw things differently, who revered Jesus for his message and tried to live according to his principles. And during the 16th century in Europe, many different groups of people began to question church doctrine and practices. The Reformation was in full swing, with the followers of Martin Luther and John Calvin rising in prominence. But there were other groups. And one group of people in particular took a very radical stance and decided to model their lives on the teachings of Jesus. They were known as the Polish Brethren, and they are Unitarian ancestors from the 16th and 17th centuries. Just listen to what these radical Poles were up to. They believed that Jesus was simply a man and that his death was a model for how suffering should be endured in the face of oppression. They rejected original sin, predestination, atonement, and the Trinity. And most importantly, they made a radical commitment to radically alter their lives to follow Jesus. The Polish Brethren embraced pacifism. The men even went around wearing wooden swords, just, like plain old wooden swords that had no sword thing in them, as a sign of their pacifism. They also said that self-defense was okay, but the taking of human life was never okay. Ownership of property was allowed, but accumulating great wealth at the expense of others was not. Some Polish nobles actually gave up their holdings. Think of the guys in the castles and the women in their fancy silks. These people gave up their castles and split up their wealth to live with others in a life of shared moderation. They practiced humility, prayer, patience, and self-denial. Over time, they created several thriving towns, most notably in Rakov, where people of all ranks of Polish society lived communally and established a printing press to publish books and tracts promoting their life-affirming version of Christianity. Rakov became the center of scholarly, intellectual, religious inquiry in Europe, and a model of a community based on love, peace, and justice. The Rakovian Catechism was widely distributed throughout Europe, inspiring many by its rational approach and also its uplifting values. But it caused others to feel threatened by these bold new thoughts. King James I was so threatened by this catechism that he ordered all copies burned in England, lest these radical ideas catch on under his watch. In fact, they were burned 364 years ago, coming up here on April 8th in 1652. And we're happy to say that there are 3 copies of the Rakovian Catechism that survived, including one that was secreted away in England. And you can go online and actually read it now if you're interested. It's pretty interesting. James I, though, was not the only authority figure who was threatened by the Polish brethren and their growing influence. Within Poland, both the Catholic Church and other Protestants colluded to destroy Rakov and the other communities and all signs of the brethren. Over a period of several years, Rakov and the other communities were destroyed by fire and pillaging, and many of the residents were martyred. There were pogroms against Unitarians, and laws that were passed previously that were about religious tolerance were rescinded specifically to discriminate against Unitarians. All the brethren who were either forced to convert or be killed if they remained in Poland. Many chose to leave, dispersing with their belongings in hand carts. Yes, I said hand carts, making their way across Europe to safe havens in the Netherlands and in Transylvania. Their demise echoes the very suffering of Jesus at the hands of people in authority who felt threatened by the courageous choice to live under love and justice. Now, while it's true that I come from a Polish Catholic heritage, I claim these brave Polish brethren as some of my spiritual ancestors as well. And so I circle back to my Easter basket, and I'm drawn to my very favorite item in it. You probably guessed. Yeah, the butter lamb. The Poles fashioned this little butter lamb as a reminder of Jesus as the Paschal sacrifice. Imagery going back millennia, all the way further back into the stories of Judaism, to Passover, where the blood of lambs was smeared on the doors of the Jews in Egypt so that the angel of death would pass over them and their firstborns would not be killed. Jesus as the Lamb of God. In the spirit, though, of Rakov and our courageous Unitarian Universalist ancestors, this little butter sculpture every year reminds me about what I am to give up what I am to sacrifice, to live a life of love, justice, peace, and mercy. Now this is about a real giving up, not a symbolic sacrifice like during Lent of giving up meat, or in my case, giving up chocolate. This is about giving up things having to do with assumptions and behaviors, my way of moving through the world. And so every year at Easter, I ask myself, what is Jesus asking me to give up? Am I willing to give up putting any kind of limits on my own loving? Am I willing to give up selfishness? Am I willing to give up consuming more than my share so that others can simply live with dignity and ease? Am I willing to give up my fear of others so that I can truly be an ally for those who are oppressed? Am I willing to give up my privileged place as a heterosexual, white, middle-class American woman? Am I willing to give up my comfort to call out bigotry and xenophobia when I see it happening? And gosh and golly, we're seeing it happening. Am I willing to risk my status to speak truth to power in the service of greater justice in our community and in our world? And then I ask questions too on a more personal level. Now, am I willing to give up my speaking so that I might more deeply listen to others and learn of their needs and how I can help? Am I willing to give up false pride? Am I willing to give up violence of any kind in my relationships with others and myself? Am I willing to give up the illusion that my individuality is more important than the common good? Am I willing to give up part of my life to serve others in love? I believe, honestly, that if Jesus of Nazareth could come here today, he would be asking us these very same hard questions and more, if he could magically appear to us this morning. Because, you know, he was not a guy that sugar-coated things. The miracle of Easter is probably simply this, that after 2,000 years, this man and his teachings still have the power to inspire reflection and right relations within ourselves and the world. What an astounding legacy. Even though it's ultimately a mixed legacy marked by the power plays and violence and intolerance that people corrupted over time. But what a legacy of love, ultimately, that we too can build on his message as we strive to create the beloved community. For if we would reflect on the true sacrifices required to build a world filled with love, justice, and mercy, we would be well on our way to achieving that. So the question is, are we willing to go there? Are we willing to give up our lives as they are, as we know them, so that the world can be reborn as a just, peaceful, and love-filled place for all of creation? So, on a morning like Easter, a morning of bright spring renewal, let's just say yes to that and start the world anew. It's what we're called to do. It's what this little lamb is telling me. May it be so. Blessed be